Hey everybody, I'm Chris Horrell, a locally born and raised real estate expert here in the upstate of South Carolina. And today on this video, we're going to talk about, is an HOA community in South Carolina right for you? So we all have strong feelings about HOAs. In fact, I've had past clients tell me that they will never again live in an HOA community. But today we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of just that. So even though I get comments about people that are refusing to live in an HOA, if you do that altogether, it's going to severely limit your options here in the upstate of South Carolina. Having lived here my whole life, my team and I help people relocate from all over the country right here to the upstate of South Carolina. Right off the bat, one of our first phone calls will include whether you are interested in living in an HOA community or not. Since this is such a big topic for so many of you, let's talk more about it here. For starters, let's talk about the positives that come from living in an HOA community. In the state of South Carolina, roughly 1.4 million people live in an HOA community, which is about 26% of South Carolina homeowners. Having an HOA is very common in a lot of towns that we service. The reason for this is that HOAs allow neighborhoods to retain their value, and initially often the homes in the neighborhood within an HOA are going to sell for more than a home that is not within an HOA. The whole point of a homeowners association is to set up guidelines and rules for how to maintain your home and the neighborhood amenities that the neighborhood is going to offer. Depending on how strict your HOA is, they may limit things like what color you can paint your house, whether or not you're able to build a fence, and if so, what color or kind of material it needs to be made out of. Most oftentimes, they're not going to allow you to park a boat or RV in your front yard or even your driveway. For example, some HOAs may restrict commercial vehicles from being able to be parked at your residence. Now let's talk about the HOA fees. Where does the money go? The money paid to your homeowners association also goes towards maintaining the community grounds like the front entrance of the neighborhood, the community pool, as well as the roads, lights, pickleball courts, tennis courts, and whatever other amenities they may have to offer. Many people who choose certain high-end or luxury communities, such as here at Harkness, have had to pay a significant price to live in these areas, and they have no problem with these restrictions because they know that it's going to keep their property values high. And if you're going to spend $750,000 or more on a home, you're going to want to make sure that it maintains its value, and you aren't going to want your neighbor painting their house purple. Or if your neighbor hasn't mowed their grass in 2 years or parks their cars on the front lawn and they have a camper in the driveway, that's definitely going to be something that's going to affect the value of your home when you go to sell. This isn't to say that if the neighborhood doesn't have an HOA that everything is going downhill, but if you aren't going to have any rules or anything to reinforce or fall back on if your neighbor does decide to do something, you are counting on your neighbor to be a good neighbor and not do those things. All right, so one of the major turnoffs for people who have lived in states like Florida, for example, are how strict HOAs have been in their experience. Now, based on the stories that we have from clients who have relocated from places like Florida, I think it's fair to say that we often ask where they're moving from, and we're like, well, wait, let's talk about the HOAs here because there is a difference. But it's fair to say that you're going to find that many HOAs here tend to be more lenient than the HOAs down in Florida. And we also found that a major difference in the price of HOAs here as compared to the rest of the country. If you live in a community with a price point of around $500,000 or so, you can expect that your HOA for the year is probably going to be somewhere around $500 to $1,000 a year, of course. If you live in a community with it for the year, is probably going to be somewhere between $500 and $1,000 for the year. Of course, if you're living in a gated community or a golf course community within a country club, you're going to expect to pay significantly higher than that. It's not going to be nearly as much as what we have been told by clients that have come from Florida or California. We recently had a Florida client that we relocated here to the upstate of South Carolina who stated that their annual HOA fees here in Greenville were equivalent to their monthly HOA fees in the state of Florida. That is an insane price difference across the board. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is that if you are living in a 55-plus community or a retirement community in Florida, obviously those costs are going to be much higher. And you're also going to experience a much higher HOA if you are living in a community like that, because it has a greater level of amenities that they are providing. So hopefully by now you're starting to see why some people would opt to be in an HOA. And aside from the obvious price difference that is associated with living in an HOA community, why would you choose not to live in an HOA community? Let's talk about that. Well, many people state that the reason they don't want to live in one is simply because they don't want to be told what to do. And it definitely does vary on how strict the neighborhood can be. Like I said, in some communities, you'll get a letter in your mailbox if you don't roll your trash can to the back in a timely manner, or if you don't cut your grass every 2 weeks or so, you may get a letter in your mailbox for that as well. Some homeowners just don't want to be told what to do or how to live. And they obviously don't want to be told how to maintain their home. However, there are some people that just don't want to be told how to live on their own property. And another thing you may want to note is that even if you don't live in an HOA community, it can still be regulated by the city or county restrictions. And an example of that might be the number of dogs that you can have, or maybe even chickens or a rooster. And these are all things that we can discuss as I get to know you and what you're looking for. Keep in mind that 80 to 90% of new construction homes are going to be in a neighborhood with an HOA. Occasionally, you will find a builder that has bought a piece of land and they built 2 or 3 homes together, and sometimes a little bit more than that, that are not part of an HOA or a neighborhood. However, that is something to keep in mind if you are on the hunt for a new construction home. You're more than likely going to find yourself in a neighborhood with an HOA. So what do you think about HOA communities? I know you have thoughts and feelings about this, so make sure you leave both your best and worst experiences in the comments below.